Jessica Sandlund, and I'm the Development Manager and an Advocate Supervisor at CASA DeKalb County. So I'm here for today's rendition of 10-minute talks, and our topic is in-person events. So let's get started. Okay, so we are going to talk today about in-person events, and we are going to talk about it in the context of like a storybook. We have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the beginning is the planning. What do you need to remember while you plan your event? The middle is the event. It's go time, it's the event. How do you make it successful? Then we have the end. What happens after the event? Because of course, what happens after the event is truly just as important as the beginning and as the middle. So what do you do now that the event is over? Okay, so first things first is the planning. I'm going to give you several recommendations in the next 10 or less minutes, and then I'll give you my top 3 suggestions at the end. So hopefully you'll have some pointers for when you're planning your in-person event. So first things first, my suggestion is to start planning early. This might seem kind of obvious, but it is essential. So CASA just recently held our 50 Men Who Cook fundraising event. Many of you might know what that event is, but it is a large-scale fundraising event. So as I talk today, primarily I'm thinking of fundraising events. But of course, a lot of these principles could correspond with volunteer recruitment events, donor events, and other events for your organization. So for 50 Men Who Cook, we start planning 6 months early. And that is, I would say, the least amount of time you need. You need at least 6 months, I'll say it that way. So I suggest you take at least 6, if not up to 9 months to start planning your event. It's critical to plan early because you need time to brainstorm, you need time to be able to reflect. If this is not your first time doing the event, reflect on last year. Think about what went well, what didn't go well, review your notes from previous years. And of course, if this is the first time you're doing the event, it's even more important to have time to brainstorm, to collaborate with people from your event committee, staff and volunteers from your organization. Get ideas, share ideas. Have time to mull it over of what you think is going to be successful. And then along the way, if you start planning early, you have time to reflect on how things have gone and how things are going and what you might need to shift. So plan early. As you plan, schedule regular committee meetings. So develop an event committee. This should include people from your staff, probably people from your board of directors, and then hopefully some other community members who can volunteer as part of your event committee. I think that's really helpful because it gives you diverse perspective, and hopefully it gives you perspective from people who've maybe been to the event in the past and maybe people who have not, to get some of those questions that newcomers might have and to get new perspectives along the way. So make sure you schedule regular committee meetings so that everybody knows when to expect those meetings to be. Okay, next, create goals. So like I mentioned, know what the purpose of the event is. If it's a fundraising event, if it's a volunteer recruitment event, a donor thank you event, know who your audience is for that event. That will help you making decisions for the event. It'll help you to know where to market, when to market, how to market, etc. So make sure you know what the purpose of the event is and then create your goals accordingly. So if it's a fundraising event, you're going to need monetary goals. You want to have goals for yourself so you can evaluate afterwards, were you successful, did you reach your goals, and if not, perhaps why not? So I recommend that you create goals for monetary, how much money is raised, and even with that, you can break that down into what, is your sponsorship money goal. If you have a raffle or an auction, what is your goal to raise from that? Maybe if you're just taking donations or ticket sales, what are your goals for those? You want goals for if you're doing a volunteer awareness event, how many people do you want to attend? How many new volunteers do you want to get from this event? So it really helps with your planning to know where your priorities are for the event and to be able to set your goals to evaluate later. Have a plan B. So right now with COVID, this is extremely important. Things are changing every day, and you don't necessarily know what the guidelines and policies will be regarding COVID when your event begins. and when your event is going to be held. So make sure you have a plan B. Have a plan B if the capacity limits of your venues get decreased, and how are you going to handle that? If you can't have your event in person, what is your virtual backup plan? What is your other plan? Of course, in person, depending on the venue, if you're indoors or outdoors, if you're planning to have part of your event outdoors, have a plan B for the weather. If it's going to rain or be any kind of inclement weather, make sure you have a plan B. Any other unexpected emergencies, including if a staff or a volunteer that's essential to this gets ill or gets exposed to COVID, make sure you have a plan B of who's going to take over their job for the event and who's going to cover their responsibilities. Likewise, it's important to make sure that there's at least 2 or more people that knows all the different parts of your event and how things should run, so that if one person does have a last-minute emergency, someone else knows what to do. The other thing with having a plan B is to have a plan for how to communicate your plan B. So if you have to shift the event format, if you have to shift the event location or something, know how you're going to communicate that to the people who are planning to attend. Okay, that goes into my next point. Be informed and stay informative. Make sure that you stay up to date on all of the federal, state, and local guidelines, the CDC guidelines, and this is particularly important when it comes to COVID. It's really critical to know the most up-to-date information. The other thing when you're hosting an in-person event is to know the venue guidelines. So if you're hosting this at your organization, know what your organization's policies are. If you're hosting this at a different venue, so for example, we held 50 Men Who Cook at NIU. So make sure you know the venue guidelines as well. This is really critical and it can help you inform your decisions and shift things quickly so that if you have changes to the guidelines, you can make those shifts as quickly as possible. Then be informative. Communicate your plan. Communicate your COVID guidelines to your guests and attendees in multiple ways. Put it on your event website. Wherever folks are buying tickets, make sure they know what to expect when it comes to COVID and whether there will be mask requirements, indoors or outdoor seating, things like that. Communicate this via email. You can put it out through social media. So we recommend sending your messaging of what your guidelines are for COVID out to your guests in multiple ways. Establish a good relationship with the venue. This is really important. So whoever is your venue, make sure you know who your contact person is at that venue and who the person is internally as an organization that is the liaison with the venue. And then develop a good relationship with your venue. It's really helpful. Communicate often with your venue. Talk to them regularly. Schedule meetings so that you can go over the plans for the event and then ask questions. Even if it seems like a question that has an obvious answer, ask the question anyway, because it can ensure that both you and the venue are on the same page, so there's no surprises the day of the event. So let's continue on. And of course, there's way more we could talk about, but because there's only 10 minutes here, I'm going to keep it succinct. Okay, so now you have your event. So what I recommend, and this is part of the planning, but make sure you have volunteers. So one thing I've learned, this was my 7th annual 50 Men Who Cook that I just attended about a week and a half ago. And what I can say is it's so important to recruit volunteers. Many hands make light work. And that's a slogan that I heard from my grandma a long time ago, but it is true. So recruit volunteers. Have more people on deck even than you think you might need. So volunteers are very helpful when it comes to running your event. If you are a staff person or even a board member, you might have things at more of a management level to do for the night of the event or for the day of the event. And so you want volunteers to help you with the logistics, help you with the practical things, help you with setup, with tear down, and doing the things that allow you to play more of a management role at the event. If you have volunteers who have been attending the event over multiple years as well, it can be helpful to sort of develop them into more of a leadership position. So what I recommend is not only do you have a group of volunteers, but it's helpful to have lead volunteers. So for example, let's say you have sponsors, you have raffles, you have selling tickets and greeting people. Have a person who's in charge of the volunteers in each of those areas. So a lead raffle volunteer, a lead ticket sales volunteer. So that way those volunteers know who they're reporting to, and that person can help address any questions and explain to the volunteers what they need to be doing that night. And you don't need to be yourself explaining all of that to all of the volunteers. I would recommend to make sure you create a volunteer schedule and send that out in advance before the night of the event or the day of the event with instructions so your volunteers know what to expect. Include things like what time they should arrive, where they should park, what they should wear, what the dress code is for the event. And send that all out ahead of time, along with contact information for who they should reach out to if they have any questions. So again, what I can say about volunteers is to divide and conquer. Make sure you have enough volunteers there, and make sure you have all of those little tasks that have to be done the day of the event and in preparation for the event. Make sure all of those are divided out. You don't want to give yourself personally too much to do the night of the event, or any one person too much to do the day of the event. So make sure you divide and conquer. The other thing I have found really helpful is to run through all of the details. So sometimes, for example, at the end of the event for 50 Men Who Cook, we do a program. We announce raffle tickets and raffle winners, and we announce chef winners, and we go through some thank yous for the event. And this year in particular, we did a really good job, I think, of running through that end of the night program, down to the details of who's going to take the basket, the bucket of the raffle tickets, who's going to open the lid and hold it for our executive director to pull the tickets. So those are a lot of details. Who's going to write down the name of the raffle winner? Who is going to hold the raffle basket? So those are a lot of details, but it really helps to know that in advance. It helps keep things streamlined. It helps make sure that the volunteers know where to be, and you don't have too many people then around either. You only have who you need. So my recommendation is to run through all of those event details and to plan who is doing what. All right, so hopefully then the event goes off really smoothly and very well for you. Now it's after the event. So one thing I recommend, like I said, to schedule regular committee meetings, I recommend that you schedule a post-event committee meeting, a wrap-up meeting, and schedule that even before the event happens, so that before the event even happens, people know when they are expected to join via Zoom or however you do your meetings to talk about how the event went. So make sure you schedule that wrap-up meeting and get as much feedback as possible. Get feedback from your volunteers, from the event committee, and even from people who have attended the event. Then take really good notes. So write down as much as you can about that feedback. That will be very helpful if you choose to do the event in the future to know what went well and what didn't. Sometimes we think things are obvious and, oh, we'll remember that when we come to plan next year. Next year comes along and you're racking your brain trying to remember how it went and what you wish you had done differently. So make sure you write everything down while it's fresh in your mind and while that feedback is immediate. Thank everybody, and we suggest that you thank people in multiple ways. Send out an e-blast, thank people on social media, thank people in other ways. And then also steward your attendees. So everyone who's come to the event, find out as much contact information as you can, either through their ticket or if you have like a sign-in sheet at your event. And then make sure you start stewarding those attendees, either as volunteers or as donors or as some other type of supporter for your organization. All right, so real quick, my big three. For the planning, plan early and plan often. Make sure you keep regular planning going on. In the middle, recruit help. It's so important to have enough volunteers to help you the night of the event. And then at the end, reflect. Make sure you do a wrap-up meeting and make sure you write down everything that you want to remember the next time you go to plan this event. Okay, thank you so much. I hope this has been helpful for you. Hopefully you've gotten some tips and tricks from my experience. at CASA, especially through 50 Men Who Cook. If you have any follow-up questions or would like to pick my brain more, I'm happy to talk with you. And here is my contact information. So thank you, and I hope your event is a great success.